Only 1% of all of the water on the planet is fresh, usable water, and it's found in our lakes and rivers. I'm Alyn, and this is Stephen, and together we work for an organisation called CatchmentCARE, who study and look after some of our rivers. We set out on a journey to explore 3 rivers, the Arnie, the Blackwater and the Finn, and along the way we met some amazing people who are taking care of them, and some of them doing mind-blowing science to help them. We got to see some incredible places, some super sights and fantastic creatures. And most of all, we learned just how important our rivers are. Do you want to find out more? Then welcome to the river.
Hello! As we have seen, rivers are amazing places and habitats. But we're going to look today at how man has had an impact on the river, whether that be from physical dropping of litter to maybe even chemical spraying on fields to help crops grow, that in turn has a negative impact on the actual river channel.
Today then we're going to go and meet some people who are having a really positive impact on our rivers. Right, so today we're talking about pollution in water, and I have a wee experiment for us. So I've got 3 glasses of water. Yes, it is 3 glasses of water. And, well, tell you what, have a drink of glass number 1.
Have a drink?
Yeah.
No problem, you're very hospitable.
You're very welcome.
Give a taste.
What do you think? It's good, isn't it?
Of water.
See?
Yes. Spot on.
Right, well, okay. Well, I'm going to pollute that water, alright? Because sometimes pollution can be seen in the water. So you see that drop of food colouring sitting on the surface. Oh, there it goes. And sometimes you can see the pollution in the water. You can see litter, or you can see oil on the surface of the water. Give that a stir. Because what happens is it gets mixed all through the water of a river or a stream or whatever. So even if you drop a plastic bottle in the playground or on the street, it'll get washed into a gully, and then from the gully it'll get washed into a wee stream, and from the stream it'll get washed into a bigger stream, and so on until it ends up down in the river and eventually out at sea. So you can always see pollution around. Yeah?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
That's good.
Have a drink of number 2 then. Go for it. Number 2.
I'm not going to drink that on.
No. Why, what's wrong with it?
That does not smell too good. What have you got in there?
It's just vinegar. But you can smell it, but you can't see it, because if you look at that, it just looks like an ordinary glass of water.
Exactly like the first glass.
So sometimes when you go down to a river or a stream, you can smell that there's something wrong, but you can't necessarily see anything wrong. So sometimes pollution can be smelt. Alright, glass number 3 then, Stephen, come on.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks okay.
Looks fine. It doesn't smell, sure doesn't.
It smells
There
fine.
you go. Alright.
Lovely job.
Yeah. What's wrong with it?
That was not nice.
What's wrong?
Oh, it's like salty.
It's exactly what it is. There's just salt in it. But this time you can't see it, nor can you smell it. And sometimes pollution can get into our rivers and you can either see it or smell it. Sometimes we put chemicals on the land, whether it's the gardeners putting it under their lawns or the farmers putting it on their fields, or we put things like nitrates and phosphates onto the land, and with the rainwater it gets filtered down through the land and it ends up in our rivers, which then does a thing called eutrophication, which means then it blocks out the oxygen in the water, which then affects all the biodiversity.
The wildlife and the plants then are impacted because of that.
Yeah, all those creatures that we saw on episode 3.
Charlotte, you're doing this as part of your Duke of Edinburgh award. Where did you start this off?
So we started in Blackwater Town, and over the course of 3 days we're canoeing up the river to Coney Island and lifting rubbish along the way.
What has you doing this?
I'm volunteering and lifting rubbish for Blackwater Art Project as part of my Duke of Edinburgh award.
And what have you found very much today?
There's quite a lot along the river.
What has you going down the Blackwater in the canoe in this fine day today? What have we been doing?
We've just been going around and picking up the litter and the plastic from the river for the Duke of Edinburgh for school.
Very good. And what would you say, what's the most common thing you found? What have you got in your bag? What type of litter?
Plastic bottles, cans and a couple of food wrappers that have been dropped from people just couldn't be bothered trying to find a bin.
People just being lazy,
Yeah.
throw it in the river. And well, you must have some drive for doing this. What is the importance of trying to reduce the amount of litter and trying to collect it and taking it out of the river?
Because there's a lot of plastic that is affecting the life in the river and in the sea.
Yeah.
And it's a growing problem.
We can all lift litter and stop it getting into our streams and rivers. We can stop plastics from getting into the sea. But what about the chemical pollution we can't see? Slurry is a great fertiliser and it's free from the back end of any cow, but it causes a lot of damage if it gets into our rivers and streams. How can we stop that? We had loads of questions, so I called a man I know from the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, Chris Johnson. He's a real-life scientist. I know he's going to know all the answers. So Chris, we're here to talk about rivers, we're here to talk about pollution, but you've brought me to see some trees. You've brought me to see willow. How come?
Yeah, good question. Right, well, some of what we're trying to do is to see whether we can actually use these fine trees to try to address some of the pollution issues that we have coming from our land.
Okay. And how is that going to happen with trees? I mean, they can't collect anything, they've no hands or anything, so how are they going to impact the pollution in the ground?
Well, the trees themselves, obviously they grow out of the ground, they've got a big root system. These particular kind of trees here, these are willows. There's lots of different kind of genetics of willows that we have going on here. They'll form a big root system, they'll help the percolation of the soil, they will allow water to run through them, they'll hold it back. They'll allow the water to run down into the soil, with the result being that that water that runs off the agricultural land doesn't run into the environmental waters.
Ah, brilliant. So this is acting like a buffer zone between the land and the streams or the rivers that are beyond it.
And that's exactly what we're investigating here. Is it something that we can implement throughout the landscape in different areas where we have most definite connection between the land and the waterway? Is it something that we can implement to try to address these and try to reduce the amount of pollution that runs into the environment?
Okay, so physically how does that happen? So we're on a hill and we've got willow to our left here, and the nutrients are put onto the grass maybe by the farmer, or if it's at our homes it'll be put on by gardeners. And as that runs down the hill, then the willow uses that to grow. But then what happens after that? What's all this, these gubbins and this material behind you? What's all going on there?
Well, Alan, this is a research site.
Oh, sorry, research.
So looking at research, and research is always very exciting. So, you know, looking up to your right there, indeed, yes, there's a big, long, steep hill, and farmers put on animal slurries, they put on farmyard dirty waters, all sorts of nutrient to fertilise our crops. Of course, crops can only take what they need out of it. There's all sorts of things will happen. Climate change, for example, could be more rainfall and faster rainfall and more sudden rainfall. So we will get a general migration down the field whenever we do get these events, and that nutrient will not be used by the crop because it'll hit the environment beforehand. So what the willows are trying to do essentially is to try to intercept that and trying to interrupt that obvious supply. The nutrient then will sit down within the willows, percolate down into the soil. And if it doesn't, if it runs through the willows, or indeed here, if it runs through the grass, it runs down and gets collected in collection drains. So why are we doing that? Essentially so we can see what might be running into the stream. And that's what's going on down there.
Now we're past the willow, and there's lots of pipes and trenches here. There's this, what looks like R2-D2 behind a fence. What is all of this? What's happening here?
Okay, well, and as mentioned, this is really just what we're doing to try to examine, to try to test whether indeed the growing of these willow crops can indeed help protect our waterways and our water quality. So what we're doing on this site is we are collecting the runoff that runs down the hill with whatever nutrient might be embedded within that water. So these troughs will collect the overland flow throughout the whole strip, be it the willow strip or the grassland strip. The water will then run down through a main feed pipe, and it'll run over a little weir, and as it runs over the weir, it triggers a collection device which collects some of the sample of the water that's running through. Then it'll just refrigerate that sample until we can get round to collecting it, bringing it to a lab, and seeing what nutrients is in there, what nitrogen, what phosphorus.
Now, these willow don't look very tall to me. Willow's a tree, it's supposed to be a big thing, but they're only what, nearly 10 foot maybe? How come they're all this same height? How come there are no bigger ones?
Okay, they don't look big, fair enough, but these were cut back at the end of April this year.
Ah.
So these have been growing only for May, June, July, August.
Okay.
So that's not bad for just 4 months. We'll let them grow another year, maybe 2 years, and then we'll have some even extra height. And then what we'll do is we'll come and we'll harvest them all down. We'll take the biomass away, we'll take that wood away, it'll come away in the form of chips, and then we will actually use that on the farm. And we'll supply our heating on the farm to replace fossil fuels.
So that's an amazing process, because not only is it taking up some of the runoff nutrients, but it's then being harvested and used for something else, which is heating buildings, and so it's a renewable energy on top of that.
It's a renewable energy where we're taking away that nutrient that is causing water pollution. This is all part of the circular bioeconomy, you see, we like to say.
Love it.
Taking all this away and replacing our fossil fuel makes great sense in terms of climate change and greenhouse gas reduction.
So Chris, we've been down with the trees. You talked about them being harvested. So we're now in this huge building with all of this equipment. What's going on now?
Okay, it's the final step, final stage. So we've got all that biomass. We're not growing it just for the sake of growing it. We turn it into wood chip, and then we use that wood chip in a number of different biomass boilers we have on site. And there's a couple of big ones behind you, and there's other technologies behind me here which convert bioenergy into heat or create bioenergy. Then all that hot water, if you like, is passed around this infrastructure you see here into that great massive tank. And then from there, that hot water is transported around the farm, around a big district heating loop, where we heat our animal sheds, our offices, our radiators, hot water, the drying sheds you saw,
Amazing.
the AV plant. There's lots of uses for heating in the farm, and that's where all this biomass energy from the willows is going.
Now, just before I introduce you to the next person helping out our rivers, you know the way Stephen likes to have a go at things? Well, here he's having a go on a big digger.
So I'm going to start this machine up. Let's see, where do I go again? I'm going to put this down to lock it up.
Put that down, but she'll not start unless you've got to start your engine
Alright, I
first.
start it first.
Start it
Here
first.
we go, everybody. Engine's ready.
Yeah. You down your lever now. Put power
Put the lever down, that's
Yep.
it, that's me ready to go now. You stay standing there.
I'm okay, I'll send you drive.
course is not normally straight. As you go downstream, you'll see that a river tends to bend, and these bends are known as meanders, and that's because rivers tend to follow the path of least resistance, and that's why they start to bend. Now, if you look downstream, you can see the bend, and whenever rivers are in full flow, when there's lots of water in the channel, that water is swayed toward the outside of that bend, and that means there's a lot of water eating away at the side of the bank, forcing it to move backwards and making the bend get bigger. Whereas on the inside, where with less water and less energy, some of the particles the river is carrying will just drop out, and you might find little shingle deposits or little beaches on the inside of the bends. Something else that's very interesting where we're standing is that underneath the water you have riffle pools, and these are stones that have been placed under the water to help channel the main current into the centre of the river. That not only encourages biodiversity here, but it also means that less water is moving toward the outside of the bend, and therefore we've got less erosion.
So as Stephen has just shown us, rivers naturally erode their banks as the force of water eats away at them, but sometimes we contribute to wrecking the riverbanks too. Stephen and I went to chat to Tom Woods, who is the catchment officer for the Blackwater, to see some of the work that he is doing together with local farmers to stop man-made erosion.
Tom, we're right down at the river, and we've got a huge big digger and a huge big dumper. What is going on?
What we're doing here is, because the cattle has tramped all the river banks down, due to lack of fencing, what we're doing first is fixing the river banks using various methods. One being the old-fashioned method where we add some stone, the other being soft engineering where we use trees and special matting and stuff that we'll see later. And then that stops the banks eroding, and then we're erecting fences to stop the cattle poaching them, which is trampling them down. And then what we're also going to have to do, because the cattle are using the river to drink, we're going to have to run drinkers well away from the river, way up there, so that they're not.
So the farmers would have allowed the cattle into the field, and the cattle would have had access to the river.
Yes.
And they would have gone down for a drink, but that's actually wearing away the riverbank.
They don't actually go for a drink. They're usually out in the summer in the good weather, so they'll stand on the river all day and do what they do, as in poop and pee.
Yeah.
Which adds nutrients to the river.
Okay.
So it's the focal point of the field. For every 10 hours in the field, they'll probably spend 3 hours in the river, walking up and down, trampling the banks, ruining everything that's there. It's just the way the cattle are, and it's just the way farming has been over the last 50, 60 years. So that's what we're trying to change attitudes and fix the problem.
Right, so what we're talking about here is doing works right along the riverbank. You mentioned there that you're putting in fences. Anything else?
Yes, we're adding, before we put the fence up, we have to add stone to the river. It's called revetment, but it's really just putting stone against the riverbank, and we do it in a random fashion.
Okay.
That it catches the
Random?
slugs. We just throw it in.
Chuck it in.
Chuck it in against the bank. We try not to level it off. We try to leave it bubbly and bumpy, not like Lego.
Not like Lego.
No, we don't want a straight face. We wanted to catch the sediments going down the river and all the rubbish and that will grow grass and form a new bank.
Brilliant.
Then we put up the fence, as you see, to stop the cattle trampling it.
Yeah.
And then behind, on the river side of the fence, we'll add some trees. We're aiming to add a lot of fruit trees, as in crab apples and plum trees and thorns and stuff like that will strengthen the bank with their roots, but also catches the runoff from the field, and I mean runoff the rain coming down.
So when the rain lands on the field here,
Yes,
and then it seeps down and it's carrying nutrients down, because I see the farmers already slurried the field already.
yes.
So it'll be carrying those nutrients. The grass will take up what nutrients it wants, and it'll grow strong. But then the rest of it will be caught by these thorns and
Yeah,
crab
well,
apples and
it
stuff.
creates a buffer. We'll not catch them all, but it certainly helps. What we have done here too on this ground here is maybe an off piece of it, but what we did is we gathered up samples off the ground,
Yeah.
as in soil sampling,
Yeah.
and it showed that the whole runoff from these fields, it's a bit of a hill here as you see.
Yes.
The slurry was cattle poop, if you want to call it, was put on up there. Within 4 hours, 90% of the nutrients was down here,
Wow.
right on the edge of the river.
So that's almost all of the nutrients from that is right down here at the
Right
base.
down here, and then 2 weeks after the first course slurry was on, we had been standing until our knees in water here, the flood, so
So the
all
rest of
washed.
it all washed down
Yeah.
into the river.
all washed
And
down.
what impact does that have on the river then?
Well, it's a constant drip, but we can say it's constantly going. As the water quality is decreasing, the bug life within the river is decreasing. We have interfered with the rivers that much over the years that we're now trying to get them back.
Yes.
You know, we've read the river out of its habitat.
Yeah.
We've read it out of its life
Yeah.
at some stage, and it's just this constant drip now is really affecting the water quality as such. So that's what we're trying to cure by doing these small measures and maybe changing attitudes as well.
Tom, you've brought us down here to have a look at this work over here.
Yes.
Why this? I mean, is this all to do with erosion?
Yes, this is a prime example of erosion of both sorts. The old river, when I say the old river, the time of the drainage scheme, the river was straightened at this point and came down here behind me. With man's interference again, we've left the banks a bit unstable.
Okay.
As you can see, the soil makeup here is a fine red soil.
Is that what this is?
This is what it is.
Yeah.
This is actually run off the fields, come off the fields and floods. The river banks is failing, and that's the fines that's washed down. And if you can see in the water, that's actually the fine gravels as well.
Oh yeah.
That comes off the soil. That's the makeup of your fields there, and that's what we're getting on the river.
Gosh, I've just pulled that out and look at all the
Yeah, sure.
freshwater shrimp in it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's great to see. But the idea here is to stop this eroding any further. So what we did here was we prepared back the bank with the big digger you've seen Stephen trying to drive earlier on, not very well, but
I thought it was
well.
outstanding.
We will not employ him. So what we do here, repair the bank back, and we added tree stumps along the whole edge here. As you see, the tree stumps are there. Basically, they create like a break on the river. You can see the branches coming in there. They slow the water down at them points. But because the water velocity here, the speed of the water is very high in flood, we had to add rock behind it. And as I say, we added the rock in a fashion that's not like Lego. We threw it out there, we threw it all around the place. And again, that will slow the flow down when it's higher, but it'll also catch this sediment.
Yes.
And grasses will grow on this sediment, which will stabilise the bank, ensure it doesn't wash away again. The brown matting behind it, that's an interesting sort of stuff. It's made out of coconut husks.
Coconut husks?
Coconut husks. War matting, I think is the proper term. That's put there so the bank can't wash away again in the big flood. But that will break down, the grasses will grow on that, and that will break down in 3 or 4 years' time, so there'll be nothing left, only a grass bank with a bit of
I was going to say, will you plant that or will that just naturally happen?
But it'll be planted, there'll be more soil put over it and grasses put on it, and then that whole bank will be fenced off again and trees planted between the river and the bank.
You know, it's true us humans have a huge impact on the environment, and particularly our rivers. So why don't you try to do your bit to support your local one? We hope that you've enjoyed our little adventure along some of our local rivers. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Now, just before I introduce you to the next person helping out our rivers, you know the way Stephen likes to have a go at things? Well, here he's having a go on a big digger.